Give me 10 really good tips just to get started with Fusion 360.
Once you've installed Fusion 360, definitely hitting save is a great habit to get into, giving your file name something that makes sense, even if you're just creating ideas right now, just if you're in the idea phase. And next, you can find those files right here in the data panel. But if you happen to crash Fusion, which does happen, sometimes you can find those files that maybe didn't get saved right here in your recovered documents. And even if you're brand new to Fusion, S key is still one of my favorites. If you hit S, it'll wake up the shortcuts. I happen to be in the sketch, so it's going to wake up all my sketch shortcuts as well as allow me to go look and search for those features, tools that I might be looking for without having to go find them on the toolbar. Hey, if you'd like a easy to follow cheat sheet of all these tips, be sure to download them for free over at my website, link in the description. Learn the toolbar, going through and understanding the basics of these features, as well as if you are coming from another software, Google it and find what SolidWorks called it, what Inventor called it, or what SketchUp called it. When you're working in Fusion, one thing you want to be aware of is the escape key. It's incredibly helpful. When I'm sketching here, even though I might be already kind of done, it's still wanting to sketch another line. So if I hit escape, it releases me from that particular sketch toolbar or that sketch entity that I'm working with. A small one that you need to know in Fusion is this X. And when you've got things selected in your dialogues, sometimes it's the wrong thing. And you just need to clear it out so that you can add the correct thing that you want to actually add to that feature set. One mistake I see a lot with beginners is closing sketches, starting brand new ones over and over again, just to effectively not really do anything. They just don't realize that they're leaving the sketch, editing the sketch, then starting a brand new one. I'm not really paying attention right now, but now I have 4 sketches and a few of those are empty. So be careful not to add brand new sketches when you don't mean to, and be sure to right click and edit the sketch that you want. In Fusion 360, the right click is powerful. When I right click, it's actually waking up the most useful constraints along with repeat command and other commands that would make sense. It is context sensitive, so it does a nice job of giving you tools that would be useful. That's the right click. In Fusion 360, you can zoom, pan, and rotate, and you can also adjust this in the shortcuts in your settings on to follow a particular software type. So if you know SolidWorks, you know Inventor, you can set it to follow that. But one tip for this is definitely get yourself a 3-button mouse. I'm a huge fan, and this happens to be my favorite. It's crazy cheap. It just works well, and it's Bluetooth enabled. And to go along with the navigation, the ViewCube up here on the right is your friend. If you click on it, it will toggle between the different camera angles. You can go to your home view isometric, and you can even drag it around and rotate using this ViewCube.
Anything else you want to mention?
How about a couple more? So one thing I'd say is you want to be able to inspect your part. One way to do that is to use the section analysis. Simply select a face or plane, and you can use that as an X-ray tool to investigate your design. And next is the timeline. You definitely want to be aware of this history panel down here below, where you can toggle between the many steps that you use to create your design or to investigate someone else's design, come back in time and make edits and insert features before something else was created. And if you're pressed for time, don't forget about primitives. Under Create, you can find things like coil, torus, sphere, and simply by clicking and dragging, you can create a coil spring incredibly fast and then use this dialog to edit and make changes.
You said sketching is important. What are some tips for getting started with sketching?
Well, a big tip for Fusion 360 is definitely select the sketch, pick your plane, and then get started on the sketching. But then from there, just sketching with lines. Next thing, I would say to keep your sketches relatively simple. Now, if you have a plate and you have 4 holes in it, I think it's great that you want to go ahead and sketch all of this at once. This is a very simple part. And then having one master sketch, this is not going to be a problem for you. But if you had something like this pattern, this is approaching where it's going to get too complicated in one sketch. Where if I go back to the original tooth profile, maybe I could do a sketch pattern and create a lot of these, but you'll start to find that Fusion bogs down and starts to perform slowly, whereas one sketch like this and then using a feature pattern is going to behave much better and solve and and be easier to edit in the future. Next, when you're sketching, it's important to keep the origin at the center of your design. That'll make life easier in the future, as well as being mindful of these 3 planes. If you can keep this in the center, so one even tip for when I'm doing this extrude, when I'm extruding, if I can extrude it symmetrically, then that's going to keep these planes right in the center, which usually makes designing in the future easier if you're going to be working from the center of this part. In order for things to be fully defined, they do have to relate to the origin and have dimensions. This is all centered about the origin. The center point is connected. Now, if I come over and create a rectangle in space, that rectangle needs to know how it relates to the origin. So if I have the distances from the horizontal and the vertical defined, now when I define the rectangle's actual size, it'll be fully defined, but it does need to relate to the origin somehow. If I just sketched a rough rectangle, I would say constraints are your first thing that you always want to do. You want to describe it to Fusion 360. So even though I didn't use the rectangle command, I can come in and say that this is horizontal, this is vertical, this is horizontal, and now it's a rectangle, but it does look like it's not fully connected. So make sure that all the points are coincident. Now, next, I would want to make sure that both sides are equal if this is supposed to be square. So this is now square by saying that all 4 sides are equal. So use your constraints first and then your dimensions is a good rule of thumb. When you're dimensioning and you can't seem to figure out what's missing that you haven't fully dimensioned yet, that's where dragging blue lines or blue entities can be very helpful. So I'm going to drag here, and now I understand that this angle has not been set up. So I do the angle, and now what's missing is this distance. This horizontal distance needs to be defined. And now finally, this angle is missing. So if I add this angular dimension here, we have it fully defined. Sometimes you'll be sketching and there's a problem with your part. I'll notice that the preview is working well on this one, but not this one. When I hit extrude, nothing will let me extrude this middle rectangle area. This one works. So there's something wrong over here. A quick way to diagnose a problem in Fusion 360 is to draw a line. So when you draw the line, you'll notice everything to the right looks good. So as I drag this line over, clearly there's a problem here. And I can even introduce another line. So I could do 2 lines at once. So when I drag the line here, I can see that there's a problem down on the bottom. As I get closer, there's probably some, looks, the line was not fully connected. Sometimes just getting closer to it, but use that line command to diagnose where the issue is. Once you've done that, it'll all come back in the preview.
How do I reuse a sketch over and over again?
Yes, so sometimes you'll want to do an extrude where you extrude just a portion and then you want to extrude the second portion. And the way you do this is you make sure the visibility of your sketch is toggled on here in the browser, then hit extrude on this second portion, and you can do a different depth for that sketch. And that allows you to reuse the same sketch over and over. Let's say you want to add a fillet or a chamfer to this back edge. Well, you probably want to just rotate and find it. But a quicker way or a shortcut without fighting with your part is to simply click and hold, and it will wake up your face, edge, and other face. So it allows you to quickly select through things when you're adding features to your part.
How about some other tips for sketching?
Yeah, a few more. So when you are sketching, you can kind of click as you go, and that will let you continue to draw lines. So I'm clicking at the end of each endpoint. I'm not holding my left click down, and it allows me to chain. As soon as I close this off, it's done. The other way to work is you can click as you're going, but you can hit escape, and that will stop any chaining or additional sketches. When it comes to selections, you'll want to be aware of there's clicking or dragging from the left to the right. So I like to say trending to the right means it's going to be very conservative and only grab things that are fully in the box. So in this case, only these line entities that were in that box. If I do the same box to the left, it's going to grab anything that touches the box or is inside of it. So in this case, it grabs these additional lines. So trending to the left, it's going to grab more. Trending to the right, it's going to be more conservative or strict. If when you're sketching, you notice that the snapping is driving you crazy, it keeps snapping to midpoints and points, hold Control or Command on your keyboard. It will temporarily turn off snapping and you can sketch and drag wherever you'd like it to go. One tool I really like is the break tool. If you search for break in the S key, you can come in and insert an actual break on a line. So this is helpful when you have a line or a construction line here, and you can use this to break this up. So with the break tool, I will come in and select this point, and now it knows that these entities are broken up. So now this is a line entity and this is a line entity. That can make life a little bit easier on complicated sketches. When you're sketching a rectangle, be aware of the tab key. So as I place this, before I do, the dimensions wake up. So you notice I haven't quite placed it yet. The dimensions are there. If I hit in 90 and then hit tab and then 80, I now have just placed both dimensions quickly and saved myself a step or two. I have a large box here and I'd like to look at where the front plane sits. And I'm going to start a sketch in the front plane. You might notice that this is in the middle of our part or of our design. So if I hit sketch, I'm now in the middle of this. It would be nice if I could cross section it. So I'm going to use the slice tool, and that slices anything that's there where our sketch plane sits and kind of gives us a cross-sectional view while we're sketching, which can be helpful. Of course, units are very important. Over here in the document settings, you can adjust your units for this file. I can make this file centimeters or inches, but I can also toggle it to become my default. So from now on, everything will be in inches. Of course, that's not what I want. I want it to be in millimeter by default. So that's how I have it set. Perfect. It's going to stay in millimeter and I can adjust on the fly when I need to.
Do you have any preferences in the settings that I should know?
Absolutely. Some of my favorite settings here, if I go to preferences under the little icon, I'm going to go to design. I love to do the auto look at sketch. In fact, I usually pretty much have all these turned on. One for sure is scale entire sketch at first dimension, and the auto project of geometry on active sketch plane, edit dimension when created. I love all of these. You can turn these off, but especially this first dimension, I love this so that when I'm drop in my first dimension, everything scales accordingly.
How do I deal with files from other systems?
So in Fusion 360, you can bring in other file types. So if we go over to the data panel and click upload, you can select files from your computer. And in this case, I'm opening a step file that's maybe from SolidWorks or from Inventor. And you can bring these files in. But one thing that's worth noting is it'll take a minute or two for this file to come in. I can see the upload progress down below. But then once it does, it's usually going to come in maybe as a dumb solid, in that sense that the timeline and history is missing, and that's pretty normal. Luckily, there are some tools you can use to make your life a little easier when it comes to working with these files. So when I open this file that was imported, this step file, you can see all the features, you can see everything, but you'll notice there is no timeline. If we right click, you can capture design history. What that means is going forward, it's going to allow you to collect any additional features or changes that you make. But what's cool about Fusion 360 is it does have dynamic editing. So first, let's try just by deleting this hole. And what's cool is Fusion just fills it all in for us. So that's really fast and cool without having to do any surface tooling there. Same thing goes for things like fillets and features. If there was a fillet here on the design, you can just select it and hit delete, and it usually can solve that for you. As well as if I hit Q or extrude, in this case, it's going to add to this face and let us extrude an additional depth. This is now all being tracked in our timeline in this new design.
Any tips for better modeling?
Absolutely. So let's say that I asked you to design this. This is in my course, my Jumpstart course, where we're going to start by creating this bracket. And I'm not going to try to do this all in one step. Instead, probably going to extrude the bottom and then this side face, then do the hole, then maybe round the edges at the end with fillets, right? So you don't have to do everything at once. In fact, what you want to do is try to create all of your solids in steps. So instead of trying to do this all in one hard feature, this is pretty overwhelming and complicated, but in reality, this is really just a series of extrudes, right? So we're doing all the solids first, and there's a reason for that. The cuts happen to intersect with each other. So it's a little easier for me to create all the solids and then come back and introduce all the cuts at the end. And then finally to introduce the fillets at the very end, those finishing touches, so that those aren't being impacted by cuts and additional solids as well. So good rule of thumb for Fusion, do all your solids, then your cuts, and then your finishing touches at the end.